I'll just say that my name is Tonya Short. I'm the Health and Human Sciences Educator with Purdue Extension in Knox County, and I'm joined by Megan Jaspersen, my colleague who serves Spencer and Perry counties. And so if you've been joining us before in the past couple months, we want to say welcome back. If you're here with us for the first time, we'll just do a few orientation things with Zoom in case you're not as zoomy as we are these days. If you hover across the bottom of your screen, you'll see a couple of different settings. One is a little chat bubble. You can click on that and it will give you the opportunity to send us a chat. So throughout the sessions today, feel free to drop questions in there, or we can always pause for opportunities for you to unmute and share your questions as well. And then we did also, you will notice, we are really excited that Zoom has a new feature with automatic caption transcription. And so if this is bothersome to you, or if you prefer it, you have your choice to turn it on or off. And so you will see if you, again, hover across the bottom of your screen, you'll have a chance to turn that on or off for your preferences. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who may or may not be that familiar with Cooperative Extension, so we are actually a nationwide network that is established in every state and U.S. territory. And so our whole purpose is to conduct research, education, and outreach to provide resources to individuals, families, and communities through sessions like the one we're providing today. And in Indiana, the Cooperative Extension Service is operated through Purdue University, who is the land-grant institution for Indiana, and with our mission to deliver practical research-based information to transform lives and livelihoods. We are very fortunate that we are still a county-based organization in the state of Indiana, and you will find a Purdue Extension office in every county of the state with educators specializing in agriculture and natural resources, community development, 4-H and youth development, and health and human sciences, which is the team that has been bringing you these webinar series the last couple of months. With that, we do have an obligation to report back to our funders, and one of the ways that we do that is by collecting data on the programs that we do so that we can show the value and the impact of what we are doing. And so at the end of this session, we will be sharing a link with you to complete a brief survey, and we very much appreciate your feedback on that to help us not only gauge your thoughts about the session, the content, the delivery method, etc., but then also so we can show, again, as I said, back to our funders to help keep what we do free or low cost to the communities that we serve. So with that, today we are going to be talking about diabetes during the holidays. And what we're going to cover is a brief overview of what affects blood sugar, a refresher on carbs and carb counting, and then the second half of the session we will talk about holiday-specific challenges and tips that we might think about. And we really encourage you to engage us, especially during that section in discussion, so that we can all learn from each other for what works and what has been maybe challenging in the past. So with that, if you don't already have a pen and paper, we always hope that with each of these sessions that you will walk away with at least one thing that you have either learned, have been reminded of, or hopefully will be able to put in action to improve your health and well-being. So if you don't already have that pen and paper, go ahead and grab that and get comfy. And we will go ahead and start with a brief breathing exercise. And so the one we're going to do today, we're going to take slow, deep breaths. And on the inhale, I want you to have the mantra, I am. On the exhale, you will say here. You can either say that out loud to yourself or to your quietly to in your mind. So on a deep inhale, I am here. Inhale, I am here. Go ahead and do that 2 more times on your own pace. And last time, inhale. I am here. And if you had your eyes closed, go ahead and open them, blink them to readjust to the light. And let's go ahead and jump right in with some group discussion. So feel free to either unmute and share with us, or type in the chat box, what is your top challenge about managing diabetes during the holidays? Sweets, food everywhere. That's exactly what I was thinking. You can't get away with it. Away from it, I mean. The sweets are everywhere. Portion control, making food for someone who is diabetic. And that craving, once we've started, right, that craving we have then for that sugar. Our schedules get too busy, it's hard to fit in that exercise. Right, absolutely. So you guys are hitting really basically what I had here. You know, our schedules are busy. How do we fit everything in? We've got that extra stress, the family gatherings, maybe more eating out, and that frequent exposure, constant exposure to food, you know. And if it's out of sight, out of mind, it's just right, quite the opposite, right? If it's in sight and we're walking by it, then it's right there. We would like to comment on one caveat today. We realize that this year may look a little bit differently. We've kind of prepared this information knowing what all of our holiday travels and meetings and dinners and gatherings typically look like. But if you have any specific comments or questions regarding if you know how yours may or look differently this year, please feel free to share those stories as we go along. So we have this long holiday season. Why does that matter for diabetics? We have those schedule disruptions, which then, as many of you noted already, it impacts our ability to keep our physical activity habits going. It affects our eating habits, not only what we're eating, but our patterns. So how frequently are we eating? Are we keeping our meal timing the same as they normally are to line up with our medication schedule, for example? And then that weight gain potential. And we know that as weight gain as small as, say, 5 to 7 pounds can have a significant impact on our blood sugar control. And so it is a big deal. And so first of all, let's get a review to make sure we're all on the same page. What affects blood sugar levels? So what would you put in that list? Carbs. Our activity level. And I had two others on my list I'm going to pop up here. Starches. So our food choices, which we have to think about carbs quite heavily when we're diabetic, but also our medication is also a really important component in this if we are on medication. Our physical activity level also is a really important component. And then actually stress, as we'll talk about later, can cause an increase or a spike in blood sugar levels. So something we really have to think about as we go into busy seasons. That may get us off pattern. And so what foods contain carbohydrates? What food groups would you put on this slide? Anything white? So Rebecca put fruit contains a carb in there, but should we avoid fruits? So fruits are a very important food group that we should not necessarily avoid, although we do have to worry about counting it when we're diabetic. So all fruit contains a natural sugar fructose, but it also contains fiber, which slows our digestion and can keep that sugar from hitting your bloodstream as fast as, say, eating a piece of candy or just drinking juice would. So for that reason, as a general rule, we try to steer folks away from juice because the whole fruit is always a better option, knowing that it contains that fiber. And we also have to take care with the dried fruit as well, because it's had the moisture evaporated. We've basically concentrated that sugar. And so not that we can't have dry fruit, but the serving size is going to be about half of what a serving size of fresh fruit would be. So we just have to remember that. And we'll talk more about serving sizes a little bit later. And then some of you in the chat noted starchy vegetables. So not all vegetables would be on this list, but just certain starchy vegetables. And so ones that would be on our list would be potatoes, sweet potatoes, any type of winter squash, corn, peas, beans, and lentils. So if you think about the typical Indiana Thanksgiving dinner, we're going to have about half of these on our plate, right? With a side of noodles to go. So we're all about the carbs around here, which can make the holiday dining really challenging. And then we also have to think about our grains. So we have to keep in mind that whole grains are also a great source of fiber, which we know helps slow digestion so that the carbs don't hit your bloodstream so quickly. However, for that reason, we want you to think about not only buying products that are made with whole grains, for example, our bread or our crackers, but also thinking about how you can incorporate whole grains into your diet in their natural form. So for example, thinking about adding barley to soup, or having oatmeal for breakfast, or having brown rice as a side dish. And so here's some examples there. And then lastly, dairy is also a carb containing food. And mostly we're talking about our fluid milk, our yogurt, and our cottage cheese. So our other types of cheeses typically contain very few carbs. And as you can see, we brought up pretty much every food group except protein. Although if we consider the fact that beans are a vegetarian source of protein, really every food group contains carbohydrates. And that's a good thing, right? Because our body loves carbohydrates. It's our primary favored source of fuel. It's just that when we're diabetic, our body struggles to process that carbohydrate energy in an efficient manner, and we can run into problems. And so the solution is that we have to pay much more closely attention, as you all know, to what we are eating and keeping that balance. And so for that, we not only have to know where our carbs come from, but also how we're counting and managing those carbs. And so one carb serving or one carb exchange is about 15 grams of carbohydrate. And the only way to really know how many grams of carbohydrate are in a food is to look at the nutrition label, or if it's a food that's not packaged, like for example, a piece of fruit, that we would have a resource to be able to look that up. But to give you some examples, we're talking about one carb serving being a small dinner roll. And so if you go to the Texas Roadhouse, I'm not talking about those dinner rolls. I'm talking about the size of, say, a small brown and serve dinner roll. That's about 15 carbs. So a half cup of prepped oatmeal, a half cup of fruit or fruit juice. You will notice that a half cup is kind of like the theme we're seeing here with our grains and our juice and our starchy vegetables. A cup of fluid milk is going to be about one carbohydrate exchange, or a third cup of cooked pasta or rice. Now I want you to shift your gauge over here to the right side of the screen. Notice a 2-inch square of cake unfrosted. That's a pretty small piece of cake, right? And that's one carbohydrate serving. You add frosting to that and you've just doubled that. Now it's about 30 grams of carbs, or 2 servings. And likewise with the sugars and the jellies. So 1 tablespoon takes up one whole carb serving off of our plate. And so that's why when we're diabetic or we're thinking about carb counting, it's really important that we're focusing on more of these whole food items or options that are on the left side of the screen, because you're getting much more food for your carbohydrate, right? And it's also paired with our fiber and our other vitamins and nutrients, which we need to think about as well. And so this next slide, let me ask you this, and you don't necessarily have to answer because it's kind of a private medical question, but how many of you know how many carbs you should be having per day? Like if we were in person having this session, would you be able to raise your hand and say, yes, I know how many carbs I'm supposed to have per day? Because what we find when we do this type of education is that people generally don't know that. Maybe they had a meeting with the dietitian when they were first diagnosed many years ago. And then, you know, we get busy, we fall into a routine, and we kind of get off track. If you don't know that number, I would implore you to seek out a dietitian or to talk to your doctor about it so you know that number. So what I'm going to put up here, this is a general example that the American Diabetes Association shares as a general guideline for diabetics. So being about 45 to 60 grams of carbs per your meals, and then 15 to 20 carbs per snack. So if you think about that, that's about 3 to 4 carb servings per meal. And then, you know, think about those serving sizes I just had on that previous page. If you have a roll with jelly, you just gave up 2 of your carb servings, right? So we really have to think about how we're balancing those. And the last thing I want to say about this meal planning is also notice how it's evenly spaced throughout the day. So there's a steady source of carbohydrates. So not only is the number of carbs we're eating important, but how well it's spaced throughout the day is also equally as important, because it's actually almost more important than the number you're eating for you to have them evenly spaced throughout the day. So think about if you went out to water your plants and you had the nozzle set on shower or sprinkle versus having it set on the jet spray like you were washing your car. You're going to completely blow the dirt out of the pot, right? Because the pressure is so hard. So that's kind of what you're doing to your body when you have, say, you skip breakfast and then have a really big carb heavy lunch and hit your body all at once with those carbs. And so lastly, when we're thinking about carb counting, I will just give this to you. So we often teach the Idaho plate method. It doesn't really have anything to do with Idaho. The couple or the dietitians who came up with this eating plan were from Idaho. So that's how it got its name. But the focus here being on this this half portion of the plate being focused on non-starchy vegetables, a quarter being focused on protein, and then you'll notice we have our 1, 2, 3 sources of carbs. And so that would give us, if we went back here to this example, that would give us our 3 carb servings per the meal. So if you can envision this plate, it can help you with your meal planning in making sure you're getting the right amount of carbs. And so with that, the good news is I will say that no matter what time of year it is, the rules stay the same. So if you already have had these plans in action in your life, then all you have to do is help think about some of these challenges that come up during the holidays and what can you do to keep your plans in place. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Megan, and she's going to talk a little bit about those.
Okay, thank you for setting the stage, Tonya. That was awesome information. And like she said, we're going to shift to think about specifically what challenges the holidays present. They bring a lot of joy, but they can also really turn our schedules completely upside down, right? You know, we're not in our regular routines. We're out visiting family. We've got time off work, or, you know, we're doing more parties with friends. I want to stress that as much as you can, keep to your normal routines. I know it's challenging, but this includes the timing of your meals. So if you're on medication, some of these medications have their dosage and their timing tied to your typical eating patterns or habits. And I know when we are doing holiday meals or getting invites from other people, we don't necessarily have control over that. But so for example, is lunch or dinner your large meal of the day? You might get invited to a Thanksgiving that you're having a huge meal at lunchtime, and that's not typical. So to get maximum benefit from your medication, we really need to keep in mind our normal eating patterns in relation to that medication. And when we're thinking about schedule and normal routines, we also really need to keep all of our other self-care activities in place as much as possible. So this includes a lot of different things for a lot of people, but some of the primary ones I want to highlight. This includes, but is not limited to, your exercise routine. Tonya mentioned physical activity is so important in helping control our blood sugars, and our sleeping habits as well. And then just in general, checking out when you need to. This time of year can really mean a lot of time around family, especially if you're traveling to get to them. So just make sure that you're setting boundaries and not neglecting your own personal care, and thinking about, your own mental health through all of this, because you really need to take care of yourself and think about that as you're progressing through the holidays. Tonya, I am trying to advance this slide, and it is not letting me. There we go. Okay. Next, I want to hit on not skipping meals to compensate for a big meal that you're going to have later, right? So we've committed to staying on track as much as possible and planning ahead, but we all know that there will be some disruptions to our routine, and that is unavoidable. So when we're thinking about holiday dinners and the invitations, and sometimes the pressure to overeat, you might be tempted to skip some meals. Please, I'm imploring you, do not do that. Tonya mentioned this a little bit, but you cannot save up your carbs and your calories. You can try, but this rarely works out the way that you hope. So oftentimes, what's this going to lead to? It's going to mean overeating, or creating a psychology that maybe because you skipped lunch, you can have that extra dessert that you didn't necessarily plan on, or an extra serving of grandma's famous dressing, or whatever it is that really gets you at these Thanksgiving meals and Christmas meals that are, or other holiday meals that are just loaded with these special carbs. And unfortunately, it really doesn't work this way, especially when you are diabetic. And it's important to think about having these consistent levels of carbs throughout the day. It is just important for your blood sugar control as the number of carbs that you are eating and how many you are eating. Okay, so something else to really think about when we're thinking about the challenges that the holiday brings is oftentimes things are just centered around those meals and around that food. But when we sit around the dinner table, I think it's really important to focus on other things as well. For example, the time that you're spending together, the people you're spending it with. Maybe you're seeing family or friends that you haven't seen in a long time, or maybe since the previous year's meal. Focus on the stories and the laughter, and really try and make it more than about just the food and just the meal, just those snacks and appetizers. Think about the entire social experience. And then when you are eating, really take the time to focus on the food, savor those textures and flavors slowly. And this can really make a huge, huge difference. When we mindlessly eat, it's really easy to lose track of counting our carbs, and then you end up playing a guessing game, which is never good for your sugar. So I want to challenge you to think about what other activities that your family might do. And if you guys throw out some ideas in the chat box, what are some other things that your family does that's not necessarily focused on food around the holidays? That could be a fun tradition that's not food related. Or if your family doesn't necessarily do that, think about what might be fun to start. Yeah, Kelly said board games. That's awesome. It provides another platform to focus your attention on besides just the dinner table. I know in our family, we do a lot of games as well. And or sometimes on Thanksgiving, it's a football game on TV, or at Christmas, we usually have a, a reoccurring movie on the Christmas Story, and that's always a highlight of our year. So not necessarily just focusing on the meal, but thinking about some other traditions that your family does or could do to shift that focus a little bit. Okay, so how will you plan for that holiday meal? Because you know you're not going to show up and there's not going to be any food, right? We just talked about not arriving hungry, but we also need to be aware of those snacks or appetizers that are laid out to tempt us. Maybe you can be the one to bring a veggie tray with a non-starchy choice and a low-fat dip, or some of those other options that Tonya just highlighted. And there really are a lot of other choices. You know, if you're not in control of who's bringing what to the party, there are going to be some temptations that you will want to steer clear of. But I find myself that if there are, if there are healthy options, and I make a point to tell myself ahead of time, avoid the buffalo chicken cheese dip that is laden with, high carbs, then and make the healthy choice, then I'll be a lot more likely to do that if I just think about it on the front end. Something else that you can do if you're concerned, either for yourself or others, is talk to the host about what your needs are as a diabetic, and talk to them about your concerns and ask what else might be available, and not only for your own needs, but just for wanting to make the meal more healthy for the entire family. I don't think that anybody will ever be offended by that. And the same goes for talking with your coworkers. If we're thinking about this in a setting outside of just the family meal, and if you are working in an office place, there's probably going to be some temptations there. Think about your office setting. Is there a constant bombardment of treats and junk that gets set in a break room or a common area? See if you can make an agreement to bring in more healthy treats, or you could reduce the number that get brought in, and talk to your office mates about that. Don't be afraid, because I think a lot of the times you'll find that if you're expressing your concerns with the people that you love and the people that you work with, they will be cheerleaders for you, and they will respect your needs around these things. So maybe see if you can bring in something healthier, or ask your coworkers to maybe pick a different place for these treats and snacks to hang out, so they're more out of sight and less of a temptation for you. I don't think that that's something that we often think of, but it could be as simple as just asking oftentimes. Okay. We talked a little bit about making a plan. If you know that you will not be able to resist a slice of pie, then plan for it. It is okay. We do not want to squash your joy this holiday season and tell you that you can't go for any of the good stuff. We just want you to think of your plan, okay? So if you know that you need that slice of pie and you're going to have it regardless of whether you plan for it or not, adjust the other carb foods in your meal. For example, you might want to forego that dinner roll or that biscuit with jelly, and use those carbs for the pie. You can also plan for extra physical activity after the meal to help balance out those carbs. Now, I will caution you, if you're going to plan for it and say, I'm going to have the pie because I'm going to walk around the block, you need to think about keeping in mind, if this is your plan, that a little stroll around the block does not cut it. Okay. For example, half of a cup of stuffing is about 200 calories, and this can take about 60 minutes of brisk walking to walk that off. So if your plan is to increase your physical activity, you might want to plan accordingly, because don't underestimate how much some of these foods can contain. We want to stress again, keeping track of not only what you eat, but when you are eating. If the meal gathering is not at your normal meal time, you'll want to plan ahead on how you will keep your blood sugar levels consistent and when you are going to squeeze in time for that exercise if that's your plan. Ooh. Okay. So this is a graphic that I really, really love, and I'm going to walk through this with you because we talk about serving sizes, and oftentimes these can be a little hard to understand, well, how much is actually an ounce or how much is actually a cup? So this is a visual that I love, and we're going to talk through. It's one thing to know what to eat or what we should be eating, but portion size is an entirely different subject, and we could spend a whole hour talking about this alone. But just some food for thought. If you have noodles that are filling half of your plate, then that's going to be way more than one carb serving. If that's where you choose to spend your carbs, then that's your choice, but you still are going to need to count them correctly. So for carb counting, you'll want to focus mostly on the fist, because many carb servings are a half of a cup, which is half of the size of your fist. So take a look, shift your attention to this diagram of the hand. I love this because you've always got this handy, and it's something that you can reference as you're thinking about serving sizes. So let's take a look at number 1. And this is the size of the palm of your hand, not including your fingers. This is approximately 1 serving of things like meat, fish, or poultry. So you go to that holiday meal and you've got turkey on the table and you love it. This is 1 serving size, palm of your hand, okay? And then let's look at number 2. On there, you can slide over and look at the thumb. This is the tip to the base. This is approximately 1 ounce of meat or cheese. I know we talked earlier about how cheese is a biggie for a lot of us, and I mentioned the serving size. The size of your thumb from the tip to the base is about 1 serving of cheese. It's not a lot, and we overdo it a lot on this. And so that's one to really watch. That's about 1 ounce, okay? If somebody says 1 ounce, size of your thumb. Number 3 on our diagram is the fist in the upper right-hand corner, okay? This is about 1 cup of something. So if a serving of something is 1 cup, or it's about the size of your fist, or approximately 1 medium fruit. And so that would be 1 serving of some of those things. And we talked about number 4, having a cupped hand. So what will fit in a cupped hand is about 2 ounces. These are things like nuts or pretzels or some of those other grab and go appetizers that you'll find on the table a lot. 1 serving of those is a cupped hand. And then if you slide down to number 5, we're back to the thumb. This is just the tip of your thumb to the first joint is approximately 1 tablespoon. So if you're having a salad, you think you're doing really good, but then you load it up with like 5 tablespoons of dressing, you're kind of defeating the purpose. So 1 tablespoon of dressing, tip of your thumb, is about a serving. And then we pop up to number 6. This is a teaspoon, your fingertip, which is your tip to your first joint. And so if you're having some post-meal coffee and you add a little bit of sugar, that's about the amount that you should be adding in. We don't ever want to overdo it on our sugars, especially because it really significantly affects our blood sugars. So to continue with portion sizes, I think these are great visuals. Portion sizes are way easier to control when you have a smaller plate. And now if you're eating at somebody else's house, that's not always an option, but just give it some forethought on the front end. This, if you have a smaller plate, it's all about the illusion, okay, created by large dinnerware. If you look at this line illusion on the left, our eye naturally perceives that vertical line as being longer than the horizontal line, even though this is the same length as the other line. This is why we feel like we're getting more with taller glasses than short, fat ones, even though the shorter ones might actually be larger. And we'll talk about alcohol in a moment. But something to keep in mind, even with juice or any other drink that you're having that has carbs or sugar in it. And likewise, on the right, in the black dot illusion, the dot surrounded by the smaller dots appears larger than the dot surrounded by the larger dots. Again, even though they are the exact same size. So this is why the same portion sizes placed on a larger plate will appear smaller And somehow seeing that vacant space on our large plate makes us feel like we don't have enough and we need to pile some more on that plate. So what do these illusions have to do with our waistlines? It may seem hard to believe that, you know, there's the glasses, the plates, the bowls, the utensils, the packaging, etc., that we use can increase how much we eat. It's true. It can increase how much we eat by up to 20%, multiple studies have shown. And so just to give you another illustration of this. Okay, the portion size illusion. I want you to take a look at this. You can see these illustrations come to life in this picture. So in reality, the amount of food on each of these plates is the same. However, our brains will actually think that we're consuming more if we load up a smaller plate versus a larger one. And so certainly think about that. Does anybody else, and you can throw this in the chat box, have tricks or tips on how to reduce portion sizes at some of these gatherings? I know I've heard a couple different things. If you guys have additional ideas, you can throw those out for the good of the group. One of the things that I have heard, if you are doing a buffet style or a family style meal, is to not be the first person in line, because dishes look a lot more appealing when they haven't been touched by other people. So maybe let a few other folks go through that line. And then that way, when it's your turn, food's still there, it's still good, but you'd be less inclined to pile it up. Susan, very good. Smaller serving spoons. Yep. Another great idea that kind of goes along with those smaller plates. Smaller plates, good. Okay. So yeah, just be mindful of your portions. I know it's hard to control, but Joe said I take a small dessert plate and use it for the main dish. Yeah, that's great. The larger dinner plates for salads and veggies. Yeah, just making little changes like that can really help you manage your portion sizes. Okay, so although some of your favorite foods could be laden with extra fat, sugar, or sodium, there are some modifications that you can make to recipes to make your holiday favorites healthier if you are the one doing the cooking. And I want to put in a quick plug, because next week, our webinar series will focus specifically on this. We'll be discussing healthy holiday cooking more in depth. But for now, here's just a few examples of some things that you can do. Number one is focus on reducing your sugar by either just using less, which is really easy to do, especially in items that won't be baked or cooked. You could do sugar replacements and putting other sweeteners in. Additionally, something that I really like to do is increasing seasonings and cutting down those sugars. So you could add a little bit more vanilla or add a little bit more cinnamon to make up for that flavor. When we think about reducing fats, you can use less of these, particularly for box mixes, by substituting fruit purees, low fat or non-fat yogurt are great options as substitute for that. And then just being mindful of what types of oil that you're using. Heart-healthy oils like canola and olive oil can go a long way in reducing fat in some of your recipes. And then sodium, things that we eat during the holidays are typically laden with sodium, right? So just being mindful of watching your added salts, or as you're cooking, using herbs and spices in place of some of those salts, again, to increase that flavor, but keep your sodium low. And then, as always, we want to increase our fiber by adding fruits, vegetables, and whole grains to some of the dishes that we're making. And you'd be surprised, there are some sneaky ways to get those into your meals. So just think about how you might be able to do that if you're the one doing the preparing. Okay, and as promised, I said we would talk about alcohol, because a lot of the times this is present at our parties as well. And alcohol in and of itself can cause blood sugar levels to drop. But then depending on what you're drinking, you could be taking in a fair number of empty carbs and calories that can really affect your blood sugar as well as your waistline. And it can just be really unpredictable how it affects your sugar. So first, again, I want to say that make sure that you're paying attention to your serving sizes and accounting for how much you're actually consuming. I think a lot of times we tend to overlook the calories and the carbs that we're intaking if they're liquid. So think about that, but this is a great graphic to demonstrate serving sizes for our alcohol. So I'm going to go back to that illusion of the short glass versus the tall glass. Keep in mind that glasses might hold much more than one serving. And so just be mindful of that. And if possible, you'll want to stick to lower sugar mixers or lower carb beer options. And if your blood sugar is not well controlled, you should really skip alcohol altogether, as I said, because it can really be pretty unpredictable in how it's going to affect your blood sugar. And Tonya's going to throw a link in the chat box at the end of this that has some handouts. We do have a great handout referencing what can you eat as far as alcohol and what that's going to do from the American Diabetes Association. So make sure that you're going to make sure to check that out after our presentation as well. Okay, we mentioned stress earlier. I want to talk a little bit more about how that can affect our blood sugar, because it certainly can. I know my husband is a type 1 diabetic, and I don't know, there's not much else that affects his blood sugar in surprising ways than his stress level. And so it can have a pretty negative impact on your blood sugar levels, especially if it's chronic and if it's uncontrolled. And so to get a little bit technical, the same hormones that are activated when you are stressed also trigger the release of the hormone glucagon, which is responsible for sending glucose to the bloodstream, which then raises your blood sugar levels, right? That's just kind of the basics of diabetes. So aside from increasing your blood sugar, these same hormones are actually responsible for weakening your immune system, increasing your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, and all of these other negative bodily reactions that you can see on the slide here. And so I really want to, again, kind of loop back to that mental health and just say, make sure that you are taking time this season to manage your stress, because it's good for your wellness on multiple levels, not just your blood sugar. And here it is again. I know that we're hounding this physical activity, but staying active is so important for so many reasons. And it really keeps our blood sugar levels in check. But aside from that, it has numerous other benefits that you all probably are aware of, such as weight control, lowering those blood pressure and cholesterol numbers that I just talked about, that stress rises. And it's really just a natural stress buster, which can help combat the negative impacts of stress on our sugar levels. And I would really like to stress to you all to just find something that you enjoy doing and do it and make it part of your regular routine. Whether that's walking, swimming, biking, cycling, some kind of recreational sport, find something that you love and make it a habit. And your body will thank you, and so will your blood sugars. Okay, and lastly, I know we've covered a lot today, but I think this is a good take-home message, is literally give yourself a break. The holiday season can really tend to be so rushed and so busy, and we've got so much going on. Take time for yourself, but also know that if you gave in and had that extra serving or didn't get your workout today and your sugars have not been as well controlled as you would have liked, take it easy on yourself, right? Remember, it's not about what we do over the course of a single day, but our regular routine and our day-to-day lifestyle. So think about that. Go easy on yourself, because we all slip up. But also, this is not a get out of jail free card. When the holidays last for 2 months or however long that stretches, some of you guys said it starts in Halloween and ends in New Year's, we can't just afford to say, it's okay, it's the holidays, I'm gonna throw my blood sugar control and my diet out the window and not worry about it, right? it's all about moderation and balancing out your choices. So if you get nothing else from today, remember that it's okay to give yourself a break, but also please just be mindful of how you are managing during the holiday season. Okay, and as Tonya mentioned, your feedback is super helpful for us, just not only for improving the content and quality of our webinars, but letting us report back to our funders. So if you would not mind, I'm gonna give Tonya control back. And there we go. We've got a link in the chat box for you to complete a survey, or you can also do the call-in number and text that code survey 2635 to get that on your phone. That's super helpful to us, just to help us know what you might want in the future and how we can improve on some of the content that we are providing you all. And then the next thing we wanted to highlight is that this is just one webinar in a series of things that we are doing. And we have a couple other great things planned for November. Healthier holiday cooking, as I mentioned, is coming next week. We talked about stress. We've got how time management and stress are related coming on November 16th. And then finally beating out the holiday blues to round out the end of our month before we really kick off that season. So make sure that you visit our website and register for future sessions. And additionally, any handouts from today that are linked to our presentation and resources that might help you manage your diabetes throughout the holidays can be found at those links that Tonya placed in the chat box as well. And at this time, we would like to open the floor up for any questions that you all might have. So you can feel free to unmute yourselves or just throw it in the chat box. What else do you guys want to know today?
Well, I'm going to assume everyone's being quiet because they're very diligently filling out our survey because they understand how important it is for us. And I'll just make one further note about that. So, you know, we always have some sort of specific questions that go on those, but honestly, I find more value in the open-ended questions and when the folks give us that written feedback. And I've been quite amazed at how much awesome feedback we've gotten from our participants the last 2 months. And so please do type your thoughts, whether it's comments about this program and specifically or something you would like to see in the future. We are looking already at planning for 2021, and we do always hope that what we plan is based on the feedback that we get from the communities.
Yeah, I see somebody put in the chat box that they love the idea of talking to coworkers about how to approach office snacks. You guys, it's the little things that really can make a big difference as far as managing your diabetes. So like I said, don't be afraid to have those conversations, because I feel like more often than not, you'll find people are cheerleading you versus snubbing your suggestions.
And actually, I did have that conversation in my office, and everybody was like, yeah, we know, we don't want that stuff around either, but it like just always happens. It just always ends up there, right? But once we've made that decision together that none of us really wanted it there, whether we were diabetic or not, it really has changed the quantity and quality of snacks that appear on that community table.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else coming into the chat box. On our slides, Tonya and I have listed our contact information. So if you need anything else related to diabetes education, please feel free to reach out directly to us and put us to work. That is what we are here for. Interested in hearing more about replacing oil with fruit purees, what kind of percentage of replacement works well? I don't know if Tonya, have you done much of this or?
So typically in baking, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if say the cake recipe calls for 3/4 cup of oil, you can replace that with 3/4 cup of applesauce. Or if you're really, and it will maybe change your texture just a little bit. So if you're concerned about that, you might experiment just doing 50-50 to start with and seeing where that takes you. But we can be sure to maybe have some handouts for next week, since that's what all next week is going to be about. And I did just drop one more time the link to the handouts and some other resource links that we suggest on this topic. So if you need a chance really quickly to copy and paste that over before we log off for today.
Okay, and with that, I think we will close our session. And like I said, please feel free to reach out to us if you guys need additional information, and be sure to check back in with us next week as we talk about healthier holiday cooking. Thank you guys for your time and attendance today.
Thanks, everyone.